All right, so Caitlin, these extreme wind warnings are reserved by the National Weather Service to only issue them
this morning. Scenes of devastation across the southeast, from Florida to the Carolinas. Helene decimating towns and communities. Its death toll still rising.
Like this, with rapidly intensifying storms or very strong major hurricanes.
And we saw this blow up of lightning, which almost always means strengthening.
Because there is now an extreme wind warning that is in place for exactly along with
important moments, the most extreme moments for the approach of a storm of this magnitude.
Imagine calling 911 but nobody responds. At what point do we prioritize the safety of our first responders? That is what we are tackling today after a controversial Facebook post made by one EMS service in Harris County, Georgia. You may be wondering, who in the heck are you and why would we listen to either one of you? And that is a good question. You should not listen to me, but definitely listen to this one because he's got it going on.
So you say.
My name's Christy. I was a paramedic for over 10 years until I had a motorcycle accident where I was internally decapitated in October of 2021. So now I have some disabilities that I cannot do that job anymore, so I just run my mouth on YouTube. And this is my husband, Lee. How long have you been a firefighter paramedic?
30 years.
So you're a dinosaur.
Yeah.
So he actually just retired from one job at the fire department. He worked 48-hour shifts for 23
years.
23 years. So today is, it's our anniversary. I forgot.
Yes.
Today is September 27th. This is our 7-year marriage anniversary, but we've been together how long?
13 years.
Okay, so it's been a minute, but happy anniversary, by the way.
Girl.
So Hurricane Helene just went through. We are in East Alabama. We got some rain and some winds, but other places in the southeast obviously have been devastated. But last night, I opened the old book face and saw this post, and this post has caused a lot of controversy. And I read it to Lee last night, and his immediate reaction was a different one than I had. And so based on that, I thought, we need to film a video on this. And when we were getting in the bed last night, he started to try to talk to me about some of his opinions. And I was like, shh. But I was like, be quiet. Don't talk about it because we're doing a video on it. And I think it's important because I think the different perspectives and points are important. And I really wanted to do this video. So the post was made by Harris County EMS that says Harris County EMS will suspend EMS services if winds become sustained at 35 miles per hour. This is for the safety of our staff. Services will resume when wind subsides below 35 miles per hour. And my initial reaction was, oh wow, that's cool that they're prioritizing, the safety of their employees. And then I start scrolling through the comments, and it was an absolute dumpster fire, and we need to talk about it. So when I read you this post, what was your initial reaction, or what are your initial thoughts on it?
I was astonished. Again, I applaud them for protecting their people. Everyone needs to do that. But 35 miles an hour, that is a mid-April spring sunny day in the southeast a lot. The April winds, and 35 miles an hour is just
but that's
not that much.
It's not a gust though. The post said sustained at 35 miles an hour, and I knew that because that's kind of what he said last night. But our friend Matt posted this, which I found interesting. So this is from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. It's an EMS bulletin from August of 2011. And basically what they found was when wind speeds exceed 35 miles per hour, ambulances should be operated at lower speeds and ambulances should seek shelter when winds exceed 50 miles per hour. This information is provided as a guide for EMS. Okay, so I misread it the first time and thought it said at 35 miles per hour, but it says when wind speeds exceed 35 miles per hour, ambulances should be operated at lower speed. So it doesn't mean suspend all services at 35 miles per hour. So going through that comment section, it was very apparent that there are people on extreme one side and on extreme other side, just like in politics and everything else today. And I find that frustrating because I don't think that this is a black and white issue. I think there's a lot of nuance to it that people don't take into account. But the same person that posted that, Matt, had a really good point that I want to share with you. He says, as firefighters, I accepted the fact that I could be called to my death as part of my duty, and I swore to do so. To me, EMS has no such expectation. They are medical providers that have no expectation of dying in the line of duty, for lack of a better expression. EMS provides care, not rescues.
When does the medical emergency become a rescue? You know, I have responded to many bad calls with this guy in very inclement weather for some serious problems and some stupid problems. But I feel like anybody in emergency services, it is our job to restore order to chaos. Now, the one service saying they're suspending operations at 35 miles an hour, I'm all about protecting our people. I am a supervisor on my shift at the EMS service I work for, so I'm responsible for my people and where I send them. But, you know, we, in my opinion, are supposed to go until we can't. I can back this up with two of our people from my previous job were injured one night during a storm on a medical call because a limb fell on one of the firefighters and one of the paramedics, and they were both out of work for quite a while. It was serious. But, you know, just because we're having a thunderstorm doesn't stop a heart attack. And where do we decide, the wind's blowing, I'm not going out there that quits while this person's having a heart attack? I mean, I guess to some extent you have to make that a personal decision. But now, as far as a professional decision, I'll tell my people not to go when they can't go. Or if you truly feel you're in danger, hold on a minute until it gets better. I'm not going to make you do something you don't want to do. Now, I say this because I'm not going to call any names, but I have a person that can back me up on this. We got caught in a thunderstorm one time trying to get back to the station, and we were in a Type 3 ambulance, and we're actually blown sideways and slightly backwards across a 4-lane highway. Well, we make it into the station finally in the truck room. We just pull straight in. We didn't even try to back in. And a call come in for elderly female's power went off. Her oxygen doesn't work, and she doesn't know how to hook up her bottle. I told dispatch, tell her when this storm eases up some, we'll come. We sat there 3 or 4 minutes and got to noticing that the truck room was flexing. And we both decided, hey, this is like a good time to go fix Granny's oxygen. So we backed out of that truck room and left. Luckily, it stayed there. It was still there when we got back, but we chose to be on the road instead of in that building. It looked like it was going to come apart. So...
Hey. This is future Christy just popping in because after we filmed this video, one of my friends sent me this. And this is exactly the kind of stuff we are talking about. Had this person been more prepared, this probably would not be happening. Now this crew has been trapped for over 15 hours at this point for a call about some oxygen. So either this caller doesn't know how to work a portable tank or didn't have enough portable tanks or whatever, but this is a totally preventable problem. So not only does the patient not have the solution they initially called for, but now this ambulance is out of service, this crew is out of service, and more resources are now going to that crew that's out of service over a call that shouldn't have come in the first place. So this is kind of some of the things that we were talking about. If there is an update on this before I get this video finalized, I will put it here. Okay. Bye.
But, most of it is a personal decision. But, where do you decide it's too dangerous to do my job?
I think, which I don't know, this is maybe just call it a hunch, that I wonder if when they put out that statement, we are not going to respond if winds are sustained at 35 miles per hour. I can't help but wonder if that was mainly to be a deterrent for people, because it is no surprise to those of us who have worked in emergency services for a long time, or even 5 minutes, but general public probably does not realize just how many calls that come in that should have never even come through 911. So I wonder if by putting out that statement, if that was their way of kind of saying, hey, if it's not life or limb, we are not coming to you.
And that's the point I was fixing to address as well. I have actually done this before. If you call, you're in your mid to late 50s, you got chest pain, arm pain, shortness of breath. If I can get there, I'm coming. If you've got a toothache that's been going on for 4 days and now your head hurts so bad, it's just unbearable, I'll see you when the storm passes. I'm writing your address and all your information down. I'll see you when the storm passes.
And the place that you work and where I worked before my accident, we had that luxury of, and yes, it is a luxury. We had, so this is a very rural service in a county that is huge. So we had the luxury of being able to implement common sense and things like that. However, he has never worked at another EMS service, but I've worked at several, and at some EMS services.
Remember, the fire department used to be, we had ambulances for the first 4 years.
But at a lot of other services, dispatch rules. You are at the mercy of dispatch. If your dispatcher tells you you're going here right now, you're going here right now. Where we worked, it was not like that. They could give us a call, and, if it was too dangerous or whatever, we would advise them of what we are going to do. And
our dispatch is 911 based rather than in-house. So they perform a service for us, but they don't regulate how we function. Whereas in-house dispatch in most places has the ultimate say-so.
I think that the takeaway from this post, even though if you read the comments, which I'm going to go through a few, but for me, the takeaway, and I'm pretty sure I speak for 99% of people in EMS, if there is a bad storm, whatever, if the situation is dangerous, but you call 911 and it is truly like a life-threatening situation, we're going to do whatever we can to get to you. If that means we have to drive 5 miles an hour, that's what we're going to do. We're going to try. However, you have to use, common sense, because if we're hurt, wrecked, injured, not only is that patient delayed in getting care, but now the other responders have a whole other scenario to deal with. And so you're not helping at that point. You are compounding the problem. And I've talked about this in another video with an aggressive dog that was going to eat my face off, and I was not going near that patient who was dying until somebody did something with that dog, because I was literally the only person qualified on that scene to help this woman. And I can't do that if a dog eats my face off. So there's just a lot that goes into it that I don't think people really take into consideration.
They don't, and I want to say this. I don't discount someone's opinion. I never have. You're right to believe what you do. I have to admit that my opinion is a little different than a lot of people's, because I am fire-based. I mean, 30 years as a firefighter. With Matt, us not responding is really not an option in most cases. But there again, we're responding in a 60,000-pound truck rather than an 8,000-pound truck, and we have more equipment for more problems. You have to do what you're comfortable doing, and the way I look at it, when the shift is over, I don't mind dealing with my director or my board as to why did you do this. I'll explain it. The person that I have to be at peace with is the guy in the mirror the next morning. As long as me and him get along, I don't care what the rest of them think.
I do feel like, too, for example, when he and I would work together, I loved working with Lee because I felt like we could handle anything, because he excels at scene management, high angle rescues and extrications and all. I'm not trained for all of that. I'm pretty much useless until you get me a human being to take care of. And, in a rural area, there's sometimes you can't just drive up and there's the patient. They may be up in a tree. I've
had that call.
You never you never know. And so when he and I would work together, I loved watching him figure out these things that I wouldn't know how to do. And then he would get me the patient, and then I was usually the main one for patient care. Lee handled all the crazy scene stuff, but on the flip side of that, if at that same service, if it's me as the medic and I've got a new EMT basic partner, neither one of us are trained to do the things that he knows how to do. And so I think it's also crew dependent. You and, for example, Matt could handle a heck of a lot more than me and some new person. So it's also crew dependent, and I think that when you are no in EMS, that's going to be a huge loss to the community and the service. Just, it's rare to get somebody with your experience and knowledge and all of that. And
some of the beauties of EMS, I'm not allowed to instruct.
Yeah.
I can't be an instructor because I don't have a degree.
Yeah.
And if I have to have a degree to instruct, I'll sit on the porch and enjoy myself. I'm not going back to college.
So with that said, a Blackshear firefighter died this morning in the line of duty.
In Georgia?
Yes. Blackshear firefighter Leon Davis died in the line of duty during Hurricane Helene early Friday morning, September 27th. Davis, a veteran firefighter, died when a tree fell on the cab of a city truck. He was clearing up from a call of downed trees and power lines on Hendry Street in Blackshear, near Pierce County Department of Family and Children's Services. Blackshear Fire Chief Bucky Goebel said Davis was a great guy and his death is just devastating. So going back to this Facebook post that started all of this controversy, some of the comments are just wild to me. There was a lot of these kind of comments. Nurses and hospital staff still have to work though. Isn't this why you became an EMT, to help while others are in need? Well, of course we want to help people in need, but we also can't help anybody if we get hurt on the way to do it. And honestly, I'll go through and find some, but there were some comments from nurses that I personally found pretty offensive because it's not the same thing at all. So this person says, absolutely pathetic, talking about this post. This person says, medic of 10 years, and even I admit this is cowardly and ridiculous. Is this for real? I'm a nurse and I gotta drive to get to the hospital tonight. Sounds like y'all need to rethink your career choice. Whoa, this thread did not pass the vibe check. I didn't know that when I received my medic license that I also signed up to have my own life mean so little. So you're disagreeing. I can see, but
I do disagree with that because, like I said, we are the ones charged with restoring order to chaos. But like I said a while ago, you have to go as far as you're personally willing to. You know, I'm not faulting anyone for that because ultimately we do all have to come back home. And my ultimate goal every time I leave this house is to come back home to you. But there is a certain level of service that's expected of me. Mm-hmm. I agree with what Matt said, but it's one thing to be in an urban environment where there's pumpers everywhere, PD.
This goes back to that nuance I was talking about.
And hey, let's put another spin on it. Take our county, which is run by volunteer fire departments. We have 12 of them, if I'm not mistaken, or 13. Remember that these guys don't have the option to say no, because if someone has a wreck or is hurt or having a major medical emergency, if they're not clearing the trees out of the road, emergency services stops. And do not ever forget, these guys, 90% of them are doing it for free. Now, why is their life less important doing this job for free than a well-paid paramedic? That's what, there again, like I said, that's my opinion because I'm fire-based.
Yeah.
So, and I know that's different from people who are not.
Yeah, I think like you know, like we already talked about, it's very crew dependent, I think, because
resource dependent.
I know that I am not nearly as capable with just me and some new EMT as like you and Matt would be on it. I mean, like the level of expertise is very different. My expertise is medical care. If you were sick or injured, my expertise is not extrication, high angle rope rescues, swift water rescues, all of that stuff.
And I agree. The only thing I can't get past is regardless of the crew that's coming, the person on the other end's need doesn't change.
Right. So I've had a few instances that are relevant to this conversation. One was back in, I think this was 2016 or 2017, there was an ice storm. If you are not from the South, you're going to think we're crazy, but we are not. We don't have the infrastructure for to deal with these situations. So when our roads are iced over, it's an absolute mess because we don't have what other areas have to deal with that. So it's a different ballgame for us down here. But I was on duty one day and the phone rang and it was a funeral home and they were like, hey, there's a body at this place that needs to be picked up and brought to the funeral home. Can y'all do it? And I was like, well, huh? And he said, well, the roads are just too bad. I'm not comfortable with us going to do it. And I was like, the roads are just as slick for y'all as they are for us. So that, I understand their perspective, but it also, maybe this speaks poorly of me, but I was like, so y'all would rather us get hurt out in this versus y'all doing it. So anyways, long story short, we went and got the body and took it to the funeral home and had to get pulled out of the ditch 3 times. And we hit one car in the middle of all that. And I was thinking about this last night. This was on your shift, I think, because I remember hearing you on the radio. I think y'all got in some ice too and lost control and
Yeah,
hit
I was
something.
driving, but that was the next day.
Oh, okay. I just remember hearing you over the radio, and you were very like in.
Dispatch had called me like 4 times wanting an update, and I was like, give me a minute. I'm sliding backwards down a hill. I said, dispatch, be advised, medic 3's in the ditch. Well, I managed to straddle the ditch and keep going backwards and found a flat spot and was able to back over and be advised, medic 3 is out of the ditch. Now go ahead with your traffic while I'm sitting still, please. But, you know.
I just remember that serious voice. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, I'm sliding backwards at like 25 miles an hour, and they're demanding an update. Like, you're going to have to give me a minute.
The people that are watching this that know Lee know very well that if Lee Bullock comes over the radio and says, I need help, it has gotten bad.
Well, the call you were talking about is a perfect example of if someone has an emergency, we should go at all costs. As hard as this may sound,
make an attempt.
Yes.
That doesn't
now,
guarantee that we can.
Someone who's deceased, they're not going to be any more dead tomorrow morning than they are right now. Cover them up. And if they make you uncomfortable, close the door, stay out of the room. We're sorry, we'll get there as soon as we can, I promise. But that's not an emergency. You don't put 2 people in a $150,000 truck in jeopardy to transport a body in those conditions. You just don't do it.
Yeah. Best I remember, not only did we had to get pulled out of the ditch multiple times, but then the person was very, very large, and there were steps and everything was covered in ice. So we were having to deal with an extremely heavy body, maneuvering it down a bunch of steps that are covered in ice. Like, there were so many different ways for people to get hurt during that call.
And a good Samaritan shined on that call as well. When they slid in the ditch the first time, a guy passing by in a Jeep saw them, stopped and pulled them out of the ditch and continued to follow them all the way to the nursing home.
No, the funeral home.
The funeral home,
Yeah.
right? Pulling them out of the ditch 2 more times in the process. So you never know how people look at things.
Speaking of bodies and natural disasters, didn't one of your crews have to ride a body around during a tornado?
No, it was during a blizzard of '93. It wasn't one of my. It was actually the year before I got into the emergency services. But yeah, they had a body and were transporting it to the funeral home. Got trapped by a tree, and then that turned into 2 more trees down. They didn't make it to the funeral home for about 8 or 9 hours. But she was packed in snow. She was fine.
So they rode Granny around all day.
All night. But you know, you do what you can.
And I also had another thought last night that I didn't talk to you about intentionally because I wanted to do it here. But another reason some of those comments I found offensive, back in 2020, we all worked through COVID, and, you know, we all understood the risk, as well as nurses and doctors, and I don't know how many nurses died, but I know it was a lot. And I got COVID from a patient. When the call came in, it came in as a weakness. Patient was not really complaining of any COVID symptoms. So at that time, it was when we were prioritizing N95s because there was a shortage. So I just had on the surgical mask because it was just a weakness call. And when we got her on the stretcher, I leaned over and was very close to her face to put a mask on her. And when I did, she sneezed right in my face. And I called him and my supervisor, and I said, oh, well, at that point, I didn't think much about it. But after we dropped that patient off, one of the nurses called me and said, hey, just want to let you know that your patient had COVID. And I was like, okay, thanks. And so then I called my supervisor, and I said, if I'm ever going to get COVID, I just got it. Sure enough, 3 days later, high fever, feeling awful. And the weird thing about it was I kept testing negative. I went to the doctor like 3 times, and I kept getting worse and worse and worse it was like 5 or 6 days, kept testing negative. And finally, I ended up going to the ER because I could not breathe and was just getting worse. And I told them, I was like, I'm telling you, this is COVID. This patient that had COVID sneezed in my face. This is COVID. They were testing me in the hospital. Negative, negative, negative.
6 days in the hospital, negative.
I ended up being in the hospital for a total of 2 weeks, and I kept getting so bad that they did a bronchoscopy and took a sample of my lung tissue, which came back positive for COVID. But that was the only way I was diagnosed.
And then came back and immediately kicked me out after I've been in the hospital for
Yeah,
6 days.
so once they found out that it was COVID, they kicked Lee out of the hospital, and then I was sent to the COVID unit where I was for like another week or so. And I didn't have to go on a ventilator, and I didn't have to go in ICU, but it was quickly headed that way. It got very scary, and because of that experience, I ended up being out of work for a total of 3 months because of COVID that I got from a patient. My boss told me he gave me the phone number, said call workers comp. They're probably not going to do anything, but you can call. So I did, and I got a lovely I got a lovely letter from, I guess, the lawyer that interviewed me. And I, to this day, am so disgusted with that whole situation. So it definitely influences my opinions on some of these things. But they called me, and he was like, so in the 2 weeks prior to you getting sick, did you go to the grocery store? Did you wash all of your groceries when you got home? Did you go anywhere else in the 2 weeks prior to getting sick? And he interrogated me like I was a criminal. And then I got the letter saying, I was denied. And I wrote my congressman. I called news outlets, because in other states they made it where if you were a healthcare worker and you got COVID, it was assumed that you got it at work and they would pay for your stuff and everything. Well, Alabama did not do that. So I was out of work for 3 months, damn near died, and really made to feel like my life was worthless. And that experience weighed heavily on me in the next year, because I was only able to work another year before I had my accident. But that's always in the back of my head. Like, if you take a risk and it does not work out well for you, you're SOL.
All right, now let's apply that to the original question at hand. Mm-hmm. COVID was very prevalent worldwide. Mm-hmm. People are dying by the thousands. Now, granted, there were health issues to be considered with everyone, healthy or not. But without a doubt, this is killing people. Doctors, nurses, pre-hospital staff, janitorial staff, family members, everybody. Okay, that is an immediate threat to your life when you respond to, I think I got COVID. Mm-hmm. Now, do you tell them no? You're risking your life by going in their house. Do you tell them no? You kind of got to look at both sides of the coin.
Well, I mean, as far as that goes, we theoretically, had access to N95s, hazmat, eye protection. So it's a calculated
How many people
risk.
caught it and died wearing their PPE?
I have no idea.
Nobody ever will. But you're in the environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I feel like that's a little bit different than, hey, drive through this hurricane. Now, granted, 35 miles per hour sustained winds, and a 911 call comes in, and it's, you feel like it's a legitimate life or death. I'm going to go slow, but I'm going to try. But I think that's very different than... I lost my train of thought. And the other experience that influences me, which I've talked about here before, is the tornado, April 27th, 2011. That had a profound impact on me personally and professionally. And I don't want to be dramatic about it. I don't want to over dramatize it. But, that experience just had a profound impact on me. Was I believe, the catalyst towards the ending of my first marriage. And I still have nightmares.
That's what I was going to say. You're not over dramatizing something that affects your life long term.
Yeah.
I mean, that was 13 years ago, and you still have tornado nightmares. Mm-hmm. That's not dramatic. That's fact.
But it makes you feel, am I not strong enough? Am I
Everyone
weak?
has a different trigger.
Yeah, because it's not like I was the only person that was out there. There were plenty of other people out there, and, they may not think twice about it, but for some reason, well, I know there's a lot of reasons, but for me, that was probably the single most event in my career that had the most impact on my mental health. And like I said, was the catalyst for the ending of my first marriage, which, we may talk about another time, but
It's irrelevant.
Yeah, irrelevant for this video. But yes, EMS is a risky job. And I do think that Matt had a great point that the fire service is trained in rescue. EMS is not. And, just like I think Pat Brown commented on that post, if there's an active shooter situation, we're absolutely going to try to get to you to save your life, but not until the shooting stops.
But even then, we're going to get as close to the scene as we can to be there.
I
actually thought about that earlier.
If you have been shot, let's just say, another movie theater shooting, you've been shot, you're bleeding out, the shooter is still in there roaming around, we're not going in. There are tactical medics that work with law enforcement in some places, but it's not a guaranteed thing. But like a normal paramedic like me,
and me,
we're not going in. Somebody is going to have to drag you out to where we can get you, or you are going to bleed out and die. It's just a difficult situation.
It's just, to me, it all falls under the same category with any pre-hospital setting, any first responder setting, PD, paramedic, firefighter, whatever. There's a lot of soul searching involved. Mm-hmm. And you've got to do what you feel right. Like I said, at the end of the day, you got to get along with the person in the mirror.
I think the takeaway for this whole post, though, at least what I'm going to say the takeaway is, this post does not mean that this service is not going to help you if there's a risky situation. If you have a legitimate, life or death, life or limb situation, and there's a lot of risk involved, they're going to do what they can. They're not just going to sit there and be like, well, tough shit. It's a risk, but it's a calculated risk, and all first responders naturally want to help in any way they can. And I think that some of these people very much overreacted to this post, and y'all need to be nicer.
I do not agree with them, but I do not fault them. Like I said, whether you're the crew or the director, it goes back to what I said, you got to be able to get along with the person in the mirror. But I would have not ceased operations at 35 miles an hour. I ceased operations.
Remember, 35 miles per hour sustained.
I'm thinking about that. But once it reaches the point that we can't go, then you do it. I just don't see throwing it out there to begin with. Hey, if you have a heart attack during this, you're SOL. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let us know in the comments where you stand on this. If you are a firefighter or paramedic, EMT, let us know in the comments your thoughts on this. If you are not one of those things, we would still love to know your thoughts on this, but be nice. If you have been impacted by the storm, just know that we are wishing you the best, and we will see you all very soon.